What's up, guys? As you can probably tell by the Kirby's Beyblades here, all lined up in a line, this is gonna be another list. But this one is not gonna be about the top 10 most underrated burst parts or the top 10 best anime characters or the top 10 lists that I still need to make. It's going to be a list about the top 10 things that you should buy to play, to become a competitive player in Burst Classic, which is a new format that, if it's not official already, will hopefully be very soon, which centers around playing in just the single layer and the dual layer meta, with a few of the later discs and drivers, and some of the weaker god layers being legal as well. It's just supposed to be a more balanced and exciting format to promote attack more, as opposed to the current stamina meta from the stamina meta of Burst Standard, where you just pick the wrong spin direction or the wrong driver matchup and you lose. So yeah, let's get on with the L word. So, number 10 is Yttrium, the Hasbro version specifically. Yttrium is going to be one of the best Hasbro stamina layers in Burst Classic, and since it is, the Hasbro and Takaratomi versions are not compatible, it would probably be a good idea to pick up a Yttrium as well as other viable Hasbro stamina layers as opposed to just Takaratomi. The other parts, Ring and Edge, are not very good, but Yttrium makes it worth the purchase on its own, I believe. So number 9 are Yamaterios or Shadow Amaterios and the WBBA Emperor Fornius, which I actually don't have because of the drivers they both come with, which are Extreme Dash and Hunter Dash. The rest of the parts won't be able to be used at all, pretty much, because they are too heavy and will not be balanced in the Burst Classic metagame, but Extreme Dash and Hunter Dash, we are planning on and they will both be legal at the very least. So, and they will give a huge buff to KO attackers like Victory Valkyrie, Excalibur, even things like Storm Spriggan. I think actually Left Burst made a video about Storm Spriggan on Extreme Dash, so that's going to be a good combo in Burst Classic for sure. So number 8 is Valkyrie, but specifically in my opinion, this release, the B29 entry package of Valkyrie Wing XL, because just due to the teeth wear and being discontinued for a long time, Valkyrie has shot up in price, and I believe this is the cheapest way to obtain it. XL is also a decent driver for mixed attack, though I think it's outclassed by Zephyr and Iron. Yeah, Valkyrie is probably the best Takaratomi burst attack layer in Burst Classic, so that alone makes it worth picking up, even if the launcher is bad and the disc is bad. But you have to be very, I guess, pick and choose when you use it wisely, because the teeth will wear out after about 10 battles, and it will only get more expensive to replace as time goes on. Number 7 is Deathscyther, which is, like, similarly to Valkyrie, also suffers from being discontinued and having the teeth wear down very quickly. So it's also relatively expensive, but the most cost-effective one is the Deathscyther Spread Massive, the blue one from Random Booster 2. Simply because it also comes with a good disc and spread. I think all of the other releases of Deathscyther come with not as good parts. And basically after this, all you need is a Revolve driver, and you have a top tier stamina combo, Deathscyther Spread Revolve, after buying this. But like I said, you have to be very careful with when you use it, because the teeth will wear down after about 10 battles, and yeah. That's part of the reason why Valkyrie and Deathscyther are both so low on this list, despite being pretty powerful layers, is just because they do wear down incredibly fast, and they're pretty expensive to replace just due to the teeth wear and being discontinued. But thankfully we do have a few replacements for them available in Burst Classic, so I will mention those later on. So number 6 is a bit of an either-or option, and basically you have a choice between Wyvern Armed Massive, the Takaratomi starter, and Neptune Armed Zephyr, the booster. These two are pretty similar in terms of, what they both offer in terms of roles in Burst Classic. They will probably both be competitive defense type layers. Wyvern is better at KO defense, Neptune is better at burst defense. In most cases, Neptune also has better stamina than Wyvern, and they both come with Armed, which is going to be a top tier disc for burst attack, just because it is so light and burst resistant compared to other things like Heavy or Gravity. And Zephyr, the driver with Neptune, is also a good driver for both Tornado Stallers and mixed attack combos, which I'll get into a bit later in another video. Massive is okay for stationary attack, but outclassed by things like Orbit, or Needle, or Weight, or even Revolve, and its stamina also isn't too great either. But another reason to pick Wyvern over Neptune would be it comes with a string launcher, which is nice for attack types, even though it's been, updated versions like the LR, the long launcher, the speed launcher have been released since then. It's still nice to have a extra launcher, which would make Wyvern worth purchasing over Neptune. If you can get both, then do that by all means, but they both fill pretty similar niches in terms of both purchase and role in the metagame. Number 5 is the Nepstrius and Devore 2-pack from Hasbro. Nepstrius is a bad layer, but it's pretty much the only really bad part that comes in this set. I mentioned Armed being top tier for burst attack in the previous item on the L word, but it also comes with Hasbro Zephyr, and like I mentioned before, Hasbro and Takaratomi parts are not compatible. So even if you already bought the Takaratomi Neptune or already have it, it's worth picking up this for the Hasbro Zephyr, which can also be used on Hasbro layers for attack or tornado stalling. And along with this comes Devore, which is probably one of the strongest stock combos in the entire Burst Classic metagame. Just launch it as hard as you can and it'll probably burst your opponent. Devore if you survive. This is more or less a replacement Valkyrie. It's arguably the best burst attacker in Burst Classic. I'm not sure whether it's better than Valkyrie or not, but they're pretty close. I'd argue that Devore is better just because I feel like the self-bursting risk is significantly less, especially if you find a tight disc and a tight driver to go on it. But it also comes with Heavy, which is going to be a competitive disc, and the Survive driver, which is apparently really good for stamina in Hasbro. Apparently Hasbro Survive is better than Hasbro Revolve, but I'm not sure how it stacks up to Takaratomi Revolve. But apparently it's a pretty good stamina driver, and you don't have to worry about not having as much precision, because the only left spin layers in the game are probably going to be Dragoon and maybe Luinor L2. So its Survive might even be a good part too. Either way, despite having probably the worst layer in the entire Hasbro, possibly the worst layer in the entire Beyblade Burst game included in the set, all the other parts are decent to very good, and it's definitely worth a purchase. Similarly to number 6, number 4 is also kind of an either-or option between the Takaratomi Rising Ragnarok Gravity Revolve, and also Takara Tomy Guardian Kirby's Heavy Revolve. This comes in the triple booster set, but they also released a Fire Dog recolor, which is just Guardian Kirby's Heavy Revolve on its own. And I believe that still goes for fairly cheap. Around $15 to $20 is my estimate. But Rising Ragnarok is also pretty cheap. This might be a little bit more expensive, but it is basically going to be a top tier stamina combo straight out of the box. Revolve is one of the best drivers in Burst Classic, definitely. Heavy is a top tier disc. It might not be the best for stamina, but it's still pretty good. And then Guardian Kirby's is going to be one of the best stamina layers. It is going to be kind of a replacement for Deathscyther that doesn't really wear down. It still has incredible stamina, but is very easy to burst like Deathscyther is. So it's a replacement for Deathscyther in Burst Classic. And then the Rising Ragnarok layer is not very good, but Gravity is probably the best disc for stamina in Burst Classic, and then also has Revolve, which is one of the best drivers for stamina. So, either one of these two is going to be a great purchase for any Burst Classic player, and this will actually be one of the more powerful stock combinations right out of the box. Number 3 is also kind of another either or, but I would definitely recommend picking up both, even though they are basically the same thing, and it is Storm Spriggan and Surprisin S2. Both the Takara Tomy and the Hasbro versions are going to be very powerful in Burst Limited, not Burst Limited, Burst Classic in my opinion. Storm Spriggan, the layer was pretty much outclassed when it first came out because of its weak teeth, but with drivers like Extreme Dash and Under Dash to overcompensate for that, I can see it being a very powerful attacker. If you haven't noticed, the Storm Spriggan and Surprisin S2 layers, they actually look very similar to Dead Hades, which is, I guess at the time I was filming this, was arguably the best attack layer in the entire game. So if that doesn't tell you that this will be a good shape for attack in Burst Classic, I don't know what will. The Knuckle disc is probably the best all-around disc in Burst Classic. It has great stamina, great burst resistance, also got some pretty good weight distribution too, so which makes it good for attack. You can pretty much put Knuckle on anything and it won't be a bad choice. And then Surprisin S2 is basically Storm Spriggan, but with stronger slopes. The slopes are relatively stronger than Storm Spriggan's teeth. So while Hasbro may not make the dash drivers to, I guess, buff the burst resistance of it, it naturally has more burst resistance than Storm Spriggan, which makes it viable with drivers like Hasbro Extreme or Hasbro Zephyr or Hasbro Excel as an attacker. Since Opposite Spin will be less of a threat in Burst Classic, Unite will also see use as a KO defense driver, hopefully. It's very good at that. The only thing better and more difficult to KO than Unite would be Bite, in my opinion. So, if you need something that is really not going to get knocked out, Unite is a good option for that. Both the Hasbro and Takara Tomy versions. So, these are technically supposed to be the same Beyblade, but they're slightly different and they are incompatible, but pretty much all of the parts are good, or will be good, in Burst Classic, so I would suggest picking up both, or at least one of these Beyblades. Number 2 is the Hasbro Master Kit. Make sure you scan this QR code if you haven't already. But basically it comes with a golden Excalius Force Extreme and a string launcher. I'm not exactly sure how the length of the string measures up to like the standard Takara Tomy string launcher, but honestly this is probably one of the best string launchers I've ever used in terms of like durability and not skipping and just smoothness and power in general. Like it can launch light bays like this, it can launch heavier bays like Archer Hercules, and competitive Dead Hades combos and stuff like that, and still not skip. It's a very good launcher. I've also heard like nothing but good things about it from other people. I know Kimbo really likes this launcher, a bunch of other people really like this launcher. It's, the only complaint I've heard is that it's kind of hollow on the underside and hard to grip, but it even comes with this little extension on the end, so that's not as much of a problem. I'm a lot older than the target demographic for Beyblade, and I have no problem gripping it just fine, so, with my big hands. And then, for the Beyblade itself, Excalius is probably going to be a top tier attack type layer for KO attack. This combo is actually pretty good stock. The disc is actually, Force will work well on Valkyrie and Valtyrek combos, just because it lines up pretty well with the layer, but otherwise it doesn't really have much use. It's only used to support attack, which is what happens with most aggressively shaped disc, and Hasbro Extreme and the launcher are the main reasons for this purchase, just because this will allow you to use Hasbro KO attack layers, Hasbro layers on KO attack setups like Valtyrek V2, Excalius, Surprisin S2, maybe even some other stuff that hasn't really been discovered yet, like Diomedes could be good. I hear that's pretty good for attack, but I haven't actually tested it and don't own it. But overall, this is just like this is just a really good value purchase. It comes with a great launcher and pretty much a top tier stock combo out of the box, as well as a great driver for attack, for Hasbro attack, and a good Hasbro attack layer. Definitely in the top 5. So before I announce the number 1 spot, I kind of want to go into some honorable mentions, which didn't quite make the list for any variety of reasons. First up is going to be the Valtyrek and Unicrest 2-pack. Unicrest is a great defense layer for Hasbro. Its stamina isn't particularly good, but it's got some pretty difficult to burst, pretty difficult to KO by Burst Classic standards. And unlike the Takaratomi Valkyrie, Valtyrek doesn't quite hit as hard, has not as good burst resistance, so it tends to self-burst more. I think it's outclassed by Devore for stationary attack, Surprisin S2 for mixed attack, and Excalius and Valtyrek V2 for KO attack. So overall, not the best layer, still a solid choice. And Hasbro Excel is also, it's a bit changed, it's a bit rounded off, a bit smaller tip, so that's why there's just not enough good parts to justify this over the Nepstrius Devore pack. The Gaianon G2 and Doom Scissor pack, which I actually don't have, but here's an image of it. Gaianon G2 is probably going to be one of the best Hasbro defense and stamina hybrid layers in the whole Burst Classic metagame, but Quarter, Fusion, Oval, and the Hasbro Excel are also not very good parts, and despite Deathscyther being the best stamina layer for Takaratomi, Hasbro's Doom Scissor, his burst resistance has been nerfed even more to the point where it's basically unusable. So even though it's the only way to get Gaianon, I wouldn't, unless you're KJ, the rest of these 5 bad parts don't really justify the purchase in my opinion. The Takaratomi Excalibur Force Extreme starter, this is very similar. This is basically what Hasbro's Master Kit was based off of, in my opinion. It comes with Excalibur, still a good KO attack layer. Extreme is a good driver, comes with a launcher. However, the reason I included the Master Kit and not this, and didn't do like a either or, is because with things like Extreme Dash and Hunter Dash in the game, normal Extreme probably won't see as much use, and the String Launcher, in my opinion, is nowhere near as smooth as the Master Kit launcher. So overall, this is just between the launcher being okay and the driver being also just okay compared to other options. This just didn't make the list. Revive Phoenix, believe it or not, even though you can use none of the parts except for friction, just having the longest longwinder with a light launcher to get probably one of the most powerful launches in the Burst Classic metagame with the lighter layers makes it worth buying. But if you can either pick up the Phoenix launcher separately, or even just the longwinder will probably do, that's worth buying if you don't already have it. And then both Zillion Zeus and Zutron Z2. I found these layers to be pretty good for mixed attack, although this breaks easily, and Zutron Z2, in my opinion, is outclassed by Surprisin S2. The Disc Infinity is okay, but it's outclassed by both Spread and Ring. And then Weight is a pretty good burst attack driver, although I seem to be the only person who really likes it, and most people seem to prefer Orbit. So just between like the obscurity of these parts, and either due to like breakage issues or being outclassed, these just didn't make the list. And last but not least, the number one best purchase to buy for Burst Classic is both Acid Anubis and Anubion A2. For Takeratomi, the Acid Anubis layer is another Deathscyther replacement, along with Guardian Kirby's. It has very high stamina, and is relatively easy to burst compared to other things like Wyvern or Neptune. I think the Hasbro Anubion A2 layer is not as good for stamina, but I believe it's still decent. The Yell Disc is not only like relatively heavy, it's also got a nice smooth outer perimeter to help with life after death in like the 3 opposite spin matchups you could ever have. Its same spin stamina isn't too great, but the weight will also make it decent for defense as well. And the driver Orbit is... both the Hasbro Orbit and the Takeratomi Orbit are going to be top tier as like defense stamina hybrid drivers, and also good for I guess destabilizing combos using something like Yttrium, or I don't know, both D2 and J2 will be banned, so I'm not sure. Just anything in general could be used on Orbit and do pretty well. It's a good driver, and even then, neither of these Beyblades are it's probably one of the more powerful stock combos in Burst Classic as well. So both Acid Anubis and Anubion A2, very worth picking up. So that has been the top 10 plus some more honorable mentions. Best purchases, things you should buy if you want to play in Burst Classic. I hope you found this video informative. Sorry it took so long, but like these top 10 lists always do. And yeah, I will see you guys next time. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.